Hello everyone. This week we are going to move into the urogenital system. And the urogenital system is actually comprised of the urinary and reproductive systems. Our objectives for this lab is to perform the fetal pig dissection to examine all the organs that are involved in helping urine production and all the organs that are associated with reproduction. We're going to compare again the differences between the fetal and the adult conditions in these organ systems. All right, so before we start with the urinary system, I just want to review the waste products that we have examined so far. In the digestive system, we examine how solid wastes are removed from our body, and that involves the processing in the stomach, intestine, and how the solid wastes leave our body as feces via the anus. When it comes to getting rid of metabolic waste, such as the carbon dioxide gas, this is actually a combination of both the respiratory and circulatory systems working together so that we can have gas exchange at the lungs and at the specifically the alveoli in the lungs. The blood brings the gases back and forth. It's a transport route, and then we exhale carbon dioxide out of our body either using our mouth or our nostril. Today, we're going to examine fluid, which is a type of nitrogenous waste. And the organs that are involved are going to be the kidney, the ureter, the bladder, and the urethra. So, with the excretory system, the function is to remove nitrogenous waste at the same time regulating water and ions balance in our body. Because in the fetus, their kidneys are only somewhat functioning, the urine doesn't leave their body like it does in the adult. It leaves their body via the allantoic duct, which is found in the placenta. The excretory system in the fetus, it's working, but it's considered partially functioning. So let's start with the kidneys first. Okay? And with the kidney, this is the site of where blood comes in to the kidney. When blood comes into the kidney, it has to be filtered because we want to hold on to important proteins in our blood. But at the same time, we want to remove the ureter and any excess waste. So the kidney does its job at doing this. Once the kidney has reabsorbed everything that's needed and has filtered out the waste, then it has produced urine at this point. Urine will leave the kidney and travel to the bladder via a tube called the ureter. Because we have two kidneys, there are two tubes. Essentially, the ureters are tubes that connects the kidney to the bladder. Your bladder holds the urine until it gets full, and then it is excreted outside of your body via the urethra. Okay, so don't confuse the ureter with the urethra. Now, taking a look at the placenta again, this is a cross section of the placenta. And if you see here, there's a structure called the allantoic stalk, also known as the allantois, also known as the allantoic duct. But this is the portion in the placenta where the waste from the fetus are used to be transported from the fetus to the placenta. So this helps get rid of waste in the fetus. Now, when you do your dissection, you have to lift all of the intestinal organs out of the way. So reminder, this is the stomach, the large small intestine. Go ahead and lift that out of the way, and then you're going to see the kidney. But before you see the kidney, it's surrounded by a fibrous capsule. It's a very thick tissue, so you have to remove that tissue for you to see the kidney like this. So here's the kidney right here, and then you have another one on the other side. So if we take a look on top of the kidney, now in the adult, we can see a very defined adrenal gland. They look like these triangular shape on top of the kidney. It looks a little bit different in the pig. It's more of like this grainy texture. So it looks similar to the pancreas, but much smaller. And sometimes with your fetal pig, you may not even see the adrenal glands yet because they haven't been developed. But essentially, if we take a look at how it looks like in the adult, and especially specifically in humans, we can see the distinct triangular shape. Now, if we take a cross section of it, we can actually see two layers in the adrenal glands. We can see the outer layer and the inner layer. The inner layer of the adrenal gland is a structure called the adrenal medulla. This is where your stress hormones such as epinephrine and norepinephrine are secreted. And then the outer layer of the adrenal gland is called the adrenal cortex. In this layer, there are hormones such as cortisol and aldosterone that are released here to somewhat manage stress and to regulate blood pressure in this outer portion. And there's also a little bit of sex steroid hormones that are released here too. And usually this occurs prior to puberty before the gonads take over. But essentially, you have the adrenal glands. They are considered an endocrine organ and they sit on top of the kidney. Now, if you take a look at the kidney, and let's go ahead and go into a little bit more depth, you can go ahead and take a cross cut of your kidney. You may not really see it as distinct as what you see here, but essentially, you have a million functional units in a kidney, and these are called nephron. So we take this portion right here and we zoom it in. These are the nephron, which is the portion of your kidney that's actually filtering stuff. Now, you have blood going into your kidney. Within the blood that's going into your kidney, it's going to go in through the renal artery. So here you have oxygenated blood, etc. But the blood that's going into your kidney is carrying a lot of products. It's going to go into the nephron. At the very beginning of the nephron, you have a structure called the glomerulus. The glomerulus contains the Bowman's capsules, and essentially there are slits here in the glomerulus. These slits are um, are are small enough to allow things to travel through, but they're not. But at the same time, they're small. So larger things, important things such as important proteins cannot travel through. So essentially what happens is that the blood carrying the protein will actually keep that protein inside of your body, and it's going to leave the kidney via the renal vein, which is carrying out the filter blood. So blood comes in, it gets filtered. When things get filtered, some things do not leave. The things that stay behind are the important molecules such as the protein, and then they leave via the renal vein. So let's go back and take a look at the nephron and how it works again. So after the glomerulus has filtered out some stuff, the important protein stays behind. Whatever that gets filtered through is going to travel through a network of tubules. Essentially, these tubules are very long tubes that are at the same time still working to filter and reabsorb stuff. Anything that is important that didn't get held back but your body decides that it needs them are actually going to get reabsorbed by moving outside of these tubule and going back into your bloodstream. Anything that is considered waste and your body decides that it really doesn't need it is then going to drain into the collecting duct. And the collecting duct at this point, it's holding urine. And then the urine is going to leave the kidney via the ureter. So you don't really see the production of urine until it gets to this collecting duct. And at the same time, when things travel through this network of tubules, water is getting held back. So having these extensive tubules are actually important so that you can actually hold on to more water than usual. Anything that gets left over will be excreted out of your body via the collecting duct, which drains into the ureter. So the ureter is this tube right here. It takes the urine and it goes to the bladder. And what we see is that this is the ureter. So remember, here's the kidney, and you can see a little bit of the adrenal glands. And here is the ureter. From the ureter, the urine goes to the bladder, and it is functional in the adult because it holds urine until it's ready to be excreted out. In the fetus, again, it's somewhat functional, but then because the urine in the fetus doesn't leave via the urethra, it leaves via the allantoic duct. It's partially functional. In the fetal pig, you'll notice that the urinary bladder, it looks different from humans. This is how it looks like in humans. We have a bladder that resembles a pouch. This is a full bladder. In the fetal pig, it is more elongated. And on both sides of the bladder, you are going to find the umbilical arteries. And remember, the umbilical arteries are carrying that deoxygenated blood back to the placenta. So this is actually how the bladder looks like in the pigs. So putting that all into perspective, we have all of our intestinal organs up here. So you have to lift those out for you to see the kidneys. So you have two kidneys, and then you can see the ureter, which is the tube that takes the kidney to the bladder. This is the bladder right here. It's elongated in the pigs, and then you have the umbilical arteries on either side. And I do want to remind you again that in order for you to actually see an image that looks like this, you have to remove some of the layers, the tissue layer that surrounds this area. So there's going to be a fibrous capsule. It's a very thick tissue that covers the kidney to prevent infection from spreading in the body. Go ahead and remove that tissue layer out for you to actually see the kidney in more detail. All right, so now we are moving into the reproductive system. It's part of the urogenital system. But with the reproductive system, we're going to examine both sexes. So let's go ahead and start with the males first. We are going to trace the pathway of how sperm are produced and how it leaves the body. So with the reproductive system, it's to pass on our genetic materials. Sperm are produced in the testis right here. When we think of sperm, it's produced in the testis, but it actually gets matured in a structure called the epididymis. This is a coil structure that wraps around a part of the testis. This is where sperm are matured. There's glucose that are being added into it so it can be more nutrients for the sperm. And then when ready, it's going to travel from the epididymis through the vas deferens, and then it's going to go into the urethra in the penis before it leaves the body. So that is a very quick overview pathway of how sperm are produced and how it travels through the male reproductive system. Now let's go into a little bit more detail. So when we take a look at the testis, this is where sperm are produced. But more specifically, sperm are produced in a structure called the seminiferous tubule. So you take a cross section of the testis, you can see that these right here, each of these circular things is a seminiferous tubule, and this is where sperm are actually produced. From the seminiferous tubule, it's going to go into the epididymis, and it's going to stay there and get mature before it leaves the body via the vas deferens. Now, the testis, and the epididymis, it's covered by a very important structure called the scrotum. So before you can even see the testis and the epididymis clear, you have to remove the scrotal pouch to be able to examine this. Furthermore, when sperm are traveling through the vas deferens, keep in mind the vas deferens, it's a tube-like structure that's surrounded by arteries and veins and nerve endings that go to the testes. So the bundle of those cord, it's called the spermatochore. Okay. All right. So we talked about where sperm is produced, that's in the testis, specifically the seminiferous tubule. It goes to the epididymis where it's stored and mature until it's ready to leave the body. It then travels through the vas deferens and it leaves via the urethra. Now, those are the actual pathway of how sperm travels through the male reproductive tract. But we do have some reproductive glands as well. These reproductive glands, you will not be able to see this in the fetal pigs because they have not been developed yet. But essentially, these glands are necessary to help sperm achieve the nutrients and the strength that it needs to fertilize the egg. So if you see here, when sperm is traveling through the vas deferens, it's going to run closely with a seminal vesicle gland. The seminal vesicle is a gland that's going to secrete very important things for the sperm. We'll talk about 4 of them. The first thing that's secreted by the seminal vesicle is alkaline fluid. The pH of the vagina is very acidic, which can kill off the sperm. So having this alkaline fluid is going to help neutralize the pH of the vagina so sperm can survive. The second thing that the seminal vesicle secrete is fructose, which is needed for sperm to produce ATP. The third thing that is made is actually a hormone called prostaglandin. Prostaglandin stimulates the uterus to contract. When the uterus contracts ever so slightly, this is enough to help propel the sperm and push the sperm up the female reproductive tract even further. And then finally, the seminal vesicle creates a coagulating proteins. These proteins, what it does initially is that it clumps the sperm together so that they swim in pools. Having sperm swimming pools is going to allow them to swim much faster than if they were to swim alone. Um, Once the sperm reaches farther up the female reproductive tract, the coagulating proteins are going to dissolve, and then sperm can start to swim separately, individually at that point. So, this is the seminal vesicle gland right here. There's also another gland called the prostate gland, which sits underneath the bladder. The prostate gland also secretes important things like alkaline fluid as well, PSA fluid. All these things are going to help the sperm fertilize the egg. Now, there's one very small gland down here called the bulbourethra gland. What this gland does is that it secretes alkaline fluid, and it actually secretes this prior to ejaculation. And the reason why it does that is because sperm and urine are coming out of the same pathway, which is the urethra. So having some mucus, having some alkaline fluid to cleanse this area first before sperm comes out is necessary. So sperm comes out via a cleaner entryway. When you take a look at the pig, you can see that this is the lower half of the body. This is the scrotal swelling right here where the testes are housed inside. The testis, it's surrounded by a scrotal sac. Okay? So what you have to do is remove the scrotal sac carefully out of the way, and then you can actually see what the testis and the epididymis looks like inside. So this is the testis surrounded by the epididymis partially, and then the vas deferens is surrounded by the spermatochore right here. And then you can trace and you can see that it goes to the penis right here, and this is the urogenital opening. This is where the penis is going to protrude out. And just a review, the bladder is right here, along with the umbilical arteries on both sides, and everything up here is the intestinal organs. So that is the male reproductive system. We are going to move into the female reproductive system now. So eggs are housed in a structure called the ovaries, and women are born with ovarian reserve. So once a month, the egg that is surrounded by the dominant follicles are the ones that are going to get ovulated, which is just a fancy name for the egg leaving the ovary and traveling to the oviduct. Now, usually a woman ovulates one egg per month. Some women are considered multiple ovulators, so they can ovulate more, but on average, it's one egg that's ovulated a month, and it usually switches from one ovary to the next. But essentially, you have the egg that's ovulated. It's going to travel to the structure called the oviduct. The oviduct is also known as the fallopian tube. In some textbook, it's also referred to as the uterine tube, but oviduct and fallopian tube are different names for the same structure. But interestingly enough, if you notice here, the oviduct, it's not connected directly to the ovaries. There's a separation between them. The fibria are going to beat really fast when there's high levels of estrogen, which usually occurs around the time of ovulation, to help sweep up the egg and go into the oviduct. Now, fertilization, which is where the sperm meets the egg, it occurs right here in the oviduct. Usually around the infundibulum area of the oviduct, and it occurs here. Fertilization does not occur in the uterus. So essentially, the sperm has to swim up the vagina, up the uterus, and into the correct oviduct, where it meets the egg and potentially fertilization happens. Then there are these hair-like structure in the oviduct that's going to carry the conceptus product into the uterus where it implants. And if pregnancy occurs, the zygote stays here for 9 months, grows into the fetus, and then delivery. If fertilization does not happen, the eggs come in here, it stays there, and then it gets shed during menstruation. So the egg are produced in the ovary, it travels to the oviduct, it goes to the uterus, and then it leaves via the vagina if fertilization does not occur. If fertilization occurs, pregnancy happens, and etc. In animals that carry litters, they're going to have the uterine horn. So I'll show you what the uterine horn looks like in the pigs. All right, so here when you dissect out the pigs, all you have to do for the female part is just lift the intestinal organ out of the way. You're going to find the ovary, and then right next to the ovary is the oviduct. You can also see the ovary and the oviduct on this side as well. And then here is the uterine horn. Now remember, women do not have uterine horn, it's just a uterus body, but pigs and animals that carry their offspring in litters, they have the uterine horn with the further segmentation to allow for multiple offsprings to be housed inside the mothers. And this is what pregnancy looks like in any animals that have litters. And the bicornuate uterus is just where there's a split right here. And please keep in mind that in pigs, the vagina and the urethra, they share a common opening. So this is just one opening for the vagina and the urethra. So if you take a look at the genital papillae, which is the flap that covers the opening to the vagina and the urethra, this is at the bottom of the pig. And then if you trace this in, you can see the urogenital canal, which is just the sinus, the chamber that houses both the urethra, and then you can see the vagina right here. And then moving on up, this is the uterine horn, and this is the oviduct, and this is the ovary. In women, there are two separate openings for the vagina and the urethra. So this is the urethra opening here, and then the vagina is its own separate opening. And the vagina is usually covered by the labia, which are the lips of the vagina. You also have the vulva as well, and then the clitoris right here. So this is the difference. So you can see there are some main differences between the women reproductive tract and the pig's reproductive tract. And that concludes the urogenital system. I'll see you in the lab for the dissection part.